Today, I am going to be talking about the third chapter of the book, A Life of Happiness. And this has the title of Final Preparations. First thing he talks about is that sickness is an excellent opportunity, that this allows us to really understand what it is all about and helps us understand other people when they are suffering from sickness. And throughout this book, he keeps talking about the importance of loving kindness and compassion. And so when we are sick, this helps us understand other people and their experiences and can help us develop more loving kindness and compassion. He talks about not only sickness, but also doctors and cures. And he specifically mentions Chinese medicine and its origin back in the Han Dynasty, which roughly went from 200 BC to 200 current era, CE. And the doctor wanted to make medicines more affordable and accessible. And so he came up with compounds, wrote them down, published at that time, I guess what you would call a text with this information in it. And Thrangu sums up this by saying that some doctors are very kind and compassionate, and in today's world, some are not. It's most important to have a kind heart, and many doctors do. I was surprised, actually. I went to one doctor last year, and the first time I saw him, he said, "I'd like to relieve you of your suffering." And as far as I know, he's not a Buddhist. And I went to him for the inability to get to sleep. And I'm not suffering so much, but I'm still getting no more sleep than I was then. So anyway, then he talks about how to relate to people that are sick. What our purpose is to give them comfort and to help them improve. And of course, there is a mind-body connection. He mentioned that doctors do this sometimes and say, you've got 3 months to live, you've got 6 months to live. And that can cause a person to go downhill more quickly because they get feelings of helplessness and depression and so forth. And so you don't want to say that to a person that is sick. You want to keep more upbeat and positive. He said there's a Tibetan saying, quote, "Visiting the sick won't remove the illness, but it can improve their condition." So you want to be positive and encouraging. You want to calm their fears rather than feed it. And again, some personal experience here. A few years ago, I had to have a minor operation, and I had it done in a hospital in Woodbury that was a new hospital. I found out about it because my dad was there a few times, and I was very impressed with it. And it turned out that when they were designing the hospital, they consulted high-end architects that did high-end hotels. So every hospital room had a window that looked out onto natural settings, either woods, gardens, and so forth. And they had different channels for your flat screen. And one of them was various meditations on healing. Acupuncture was free. For meals, you got room service. You called up, you had a menu, you ordered from the menu, and when they were done preparing it, they would bring it up individually rather than on a cart, and everybody eats at the same time. They said on their website that they did this because of studies showing that people heal more quickly when they're comfortable and their minds at ease and so forth. So that's really what Thrangu Rinpoche is saying here too. And in fact, this just came into my mind, was Norman Cousins back, I think in the 70s. And I really don't even remember what he was famous for, but he had some illness. And what he did is he checked into a hotel and rented comedy movies and so forth and watched them. And he claimed he laughed himself healthy. This is important. It's titled Making an Effort as a Patient. In other words, the doctor can't do it for you. He says, first of all, there are the four sufferings in the human realm, and they're unavoidable: birth, old age, sickness, and death. In my words, you can't hack the system. And wallowing in self-pity is pointless, and it creates more suffering. We just don't want to go in that direction. We need to focus our efforts on getting treated, and then there will be a better chance of recovering from the illness. And that we have to spend more time, and I'm emphasizing more, practicing medicine Buddha, reciting the medicine Buddha names, his mantra, actually any Dharma practice. Just because you're sick doesn't mean that it's beneficial to take a break from practice. It's more important to practice then than it is when you're healthy. The same thing as when we are getting older and approaching death. He stresses it's really important to let go of worldly concerns, that you don't have the energy and strength you used to have, that this kind of can be seen as an aid to letting go of worldly concerns, is I just don't have the energy and strength to do it anymore. And by this renunciation, our practice becomes more effective. So we use the illness as an opportunity to put more time into practice. He also says it's really good to do Tonglen when you're sick. In other words, take on the illness of other people and give them your help. That this really completely turns the situation upside down, that you are opening up to wanting other people to be healthier than you. So Tonglen very simply is that we inhale the pain, the illness, the suffering from another person. And then when we exhale, we give them what would make them happy. It could be our health, our money, our possessions, whatever, our contentment. He says not only will we be able to benefit sentient beings through Tonglen, but also we will develop great benefit from it. Then he talks about his personal experience. And he says that I don't see any particular signs when I do my usual recitations of mantra, but he gives the case of when he had an operation in 2015, and he did some mantra recitations, medicine Buddha mantra. And he says he awoke in the middle of the night and there was a medicine Buddha drawn on his IV bag. He said he was quite surprised. He said he rubbed his eyes and looked again and felt it couldn't be, because he wasn't in a hospital over in Nepal or India. How could there be an image of the medicine Buddha on the IV bag? And what he said is, quote, I believe I was able to see it because I had given rise to a little renunciation and devotion along with the blessings of medicine Buddha. And he says that his condition steadily improved after seeing that image. It was knee surgery, and he had similar surgery earlier, and it healed more quickly this time, having seen that image. He says that these are his personal experiences. And of course, he ends on a note of humility, saying, quote, I do not feel that I am all that capable, but I do believe I gradually recovered due to the blessings of the medicine Buddha. What he is saying here is do the medicine Buddha mantra when you are sick. that it's beneficial for ourselves and it's beneficial for others. And of course, the motivation is that you want to heal, but include that you want all beings to be healthy and all beings to heal. He then goes into how you can do a short medicine Buddha practice for others. And this comes from Karma Chagme's Mountain Dharma. And it is that you visualize a small medicine Buddha above the place on the other person that is the problem, that where the illness is or the operation, above their head, their heart, their stomach, their knees, their shoulder. Then you do the mantra and imagine or visualize that nectar flows from the medicine Buddha to that part, and it removes the pain and creates healing. He says both the patient and the caregivers should do this. He also says that the patient or the caregiver should avoid talking about sad things and about meaningless topics, that it would be much more beneficial to talk about improving the situation, dedicating their time to practice, and so forth. Again, then he ends up by mentioning that, as he does frequently in here, it's important to keep loving kindness and compassion in mind, have devotion, and do take our recitations and practice seriously. He talks about actually approaching death, that it's extremely important to have a virtuous mind when you are sick, when you are dying, and when you are in the bardo. Again, loving kindness and compassion, and the Bodhichitta motivation, this motivation to practice and be able to liberate all sentient beings, that you're doing this for the benefit of all beings. And we want to definitely avoid the harmful states of mind, jealousy, pride, envy, greed, and so forth. So if you are sick on the verge of death and you're feeling depressed and down, remember precious human birth and what a rare opportunity it is. This helps us have meaning for our life, even at the end. Again, why are you a Buddhist if you don't think that this is a good time to practice and say the medicine Buddha mantra? So he says that we need to cherish our human body, our human birth, and use it to study the Dharma, to understand our mind, understand our afflictions, and to tame our mind and our afflictions. And he cautions against suicide or just giving up. He says, quote, "But this is when we should consider whether we are able to be reborn in a happier place after death," which is something that is really hard to tell. So contemplate that if you are feeling depressed and wishing that it would end soon. So we want to cherish our human body. We want to really value it highly. And of course, if we would choose suicide, that this would create a lot of negative karma, and the karma that we already have collected will follow us, that this isn't an easy way out. It just makes things worse. So he says what the solution is to really practice Dharma, that is the only cure for birth, old age, sickness, and death, and that is to practice Dharma. The next section is titled, "A Virtuous Motivation Benefits the Next Life." So we need to guard our minds when we are sick and dying or dying. Cultivate positive thoughts. Be very careful of what thoughts and moods we are having, and to let go of anger, depression, disappointment. Having a mind full of non-virtuous thoughts at the time of death results in, quote, bad outcomes, end quote. So we need to give rise again to loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta. He keeps repeating these three words over and over and over again. So remember these words when you get up in the morning. So this is important regardless of our circumstances, regardless of the way your family members are treating you. A lot of times when someone gets really sick and is on the verge of dying, people don't want to visit you, that it's too frightening. It reminds them too much of their own mortality. If this happens to you, don't take it hard. You want to keep a positive frame of mind. And this is very beneficial for the bardo and for the next life. Then he goes into the 4 causes for rebirth in Sukhavati or Dewa Chen, Chenrezig and Amitabha's Pure Land. And this comes from Karma Chagme's writing. In order to take rebirth in this pure realm of Sukhavati, there are 4 causes. The first is to be able to visualize the pure realm. When you're alive, visualize this pure realm as much as possible. And you can look at a tanka or a picture of a tanka, and this can help you with visualization. And in this way, when we're dying, we'll be able to bring the pure realm to mind and take rebirth there. So I am going to show you, I took this picture off of the internet, and I am going to show this picture. Amitabha Buddha in the center, various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas making offerings. It's good to keep this in mind. That's the first cause of rebirth in Sukhavati, and it's probably pronounced Sukhavati. I don't know. The second cause is to accumulate merit. So making offerings to the 3 jewels, engaging in generosity to people in need, and do it regularly. When traditionally in Tibetan culture, when someone dies, large sums of money would be spent to sponsor pujas, where monks and lamas would come into the house and do pujas for up to 49 days. And when the 49th day came and went, the family would feel they did everything that they could to help that person that they dearly loved. So you can benefit yourself by making offerings while you're alive. The third cause is to generate bodhicitta, which is the wish that all sentient beings are free from suffering and attain Buddhahood ultimately. The fourth is to make aspirations for all sentient beings. And we are a sentient being, so this includes ourselves. It's not we're making aspirations for everybody but ourselves. We're making aspirations for everybody to take rebirth in Sukhavati and to not be reborn in one of the lower realms. So these are the 4 causes to be reborn there, according to Karma Chagme. And he says that denial of death is really not a very good alternative, that we want to start preparing for death as soon as possible. We want to practice, study, attend teachings, accumulate merit, be generous, and so forth. These are very important. He doesn't mention this, but one reason is that for most people, we go through the dying process and then through the bardo on the force of habitual patterns and karma. And habitual patterns are actually a type of karma. Rinpoche, Khenpo Kartra Rinpoche once called them a very insidious form of karma. He talked about monkeys who, when an eagle that would prey on monkeys would appear, they would cover their face Here in the United States, we talk about ostriches putting their head in the sand. I don't know if that's true, but it's the same kind of idea. It's very easy in this country to avoid death, to deny death, to not talk about death. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche once said that death is actually the pornography in this country. Nobody talks about it. Sex, no problem talking about that. We want to avoid denial of death and realize that it's real and it will happen to us. Then he talks about companionship as being an excellent form of care for the people that are sick and are dying. Quote, it's really important for children to be loving and affectionate towards their parents and to be there for them at all times. Here's an experience that I had, and that was that I encouraged my parents, they lived to 96 and 94, to move up closer to me to a retirement community where I could be of more help for them in their old age. And so finally, 6 years before their death, they moved up here. And Dad was a little stubborn in his old age. He was stubborn when he was younger too. And he moved to a facility that was an hour and 20 minutes away. And so I would visit him. One day when I came in the lobby, the manager of the facility came out and told me, you live a long ways away, and I see you here more than most of the children of the people that are in this institution. And I'm not patting myself on the back because I wasn't there that much as far as I was concerned. It's just that it's so easy to abandon or almost abandon parents when they get to be that age. So we want to avoid that. And if you happen to be a parent and you're in that situation and your children don't show up as much as you would like them to and don't act the way that you would like them to, it's important for us to practice patience. It might be difficult, but we gain merit by developing patience. Make an effort to stay happy and pass the happiness on to the children when they do show up. And of course, we can always pray and then dedicate our merit to our children. So these are things that we can do for the sick and things that we can do when we are sick. The next section, he titles it A Reminder for the Final Moments. As we are looking after sick people, that we need to contemplate that every person goes through the process of birth, aging, sickness, and death. And we should not feel, in his words, excessively sad about it, that this is natural. This is the way the world works. And if you're a caregiver, if you're overwhelmed with sadness, you spread it to the people you're caring for. You're also going to be less effective at what you're doing. So we want to avoid feeling excessively sad, which is different than denying that we feel sad or denying that this is a sad situation, but we don't have to dwell on it. This is one area where meditation can really benefit, is when we develop some mental stability and we become more aware of what's going on in our minds and have the ability to let go of it when we are in a bad mood and are having a lot of sad thoughts. And if you're a caregiver and a person that you're caring for is close to death, they need to have someone close to them that is calm, someone that can reassure them by saying things like, quote, you are about to die. You must keep a virtuous mind and pray earnestly to your guru or to the Buddha. I remember being with my grandmother when she was dying. I was kind of new to Buddhism and did not have any instructions on all of this. And she was heavily sedated, but I knew that she would respond occasionally. So I knew she was hearing me. And I just told her how much I loved her. I also told her she was a good Lutheran. I told her, I see Jesus above your head. Nothing wrong with that if the person is a Christian. And if the person is a Buddhist, you can say, visualize Amitabha over your head, and so forth. So there's actually a lot of things that we can do. We're not helpless. If we are the ones that are dying and you've had instructions and read various books, there's a lot that you can do to prepare for the moment. And if you have prepared, then you might say your habitual patterns kick in and things go more smoothly. This is also a time that you can practice Tonglen. You can, if the person is a Buddhist and dying, you can encourage them to practice Tonglen if they don't have a higher practice to do. It's also important for Buddhists, at least Tibetan Buddhists, to receive empowerments of Amitabha and Akshobhya. That doing these mantras are very helpful at the time of death, and that they are very beneficial to our future rebirth. Also, some of the Tibetan Buddhist practitioners have trained in POA, or ejection of consciousness, at the time of death. Or if you are fortunate enough, you may know a High Lama that can do a POA for the person that has died. As I mentioned earlier, the Tibetan tradition is that for 49 days, there will be a series of rituals for the person that has died to help purify non-virtuous karma and obstacles and allow them to be reborn in a better place. So his general advice is that difficulties and unfavorable situations arise. They're unavoidable. This has certainly been my experience. I think all of you will agree that that's the way your life has gone too. But don't give in to despair. That when our loved ones die and we are parted from them, that instead of being pessimistic and go into deep grieving, realize that we need to keep going and that we've encountered the Dharma and that we have tools to use. Karmapa talks about thinking this way, that this person that has died wanted us to be happy when they are alive, and by us doing what we can to be happy is fulfilling their wishes. So a long period of grieving is not necessary, and we can apply methods to shorten the grieving period. Again, when I had my best friend killed when I was in an accident, he was in his early 40s, I was 40. After coming in contact with Buddhism, I realized that I was grieving because I lost my best friend, and that my best friend lost his life. And that was more serious than losing your best friend. And he left a widow and he left a 9-year-old daughter, and they lost a lot more than I did. And then I met his family, his brothers, his sister, his parents. Their loss was greater than my loss. And by thinking along these lines, I eventually realized that I was grieving about minor things. It really was not all that big a deal for me, that it was minor compared to what other people were experiencing. And that really helped me work with that and transform the grieving. And actually, it was because of that that I came to Buddhism. And I now see I was able to use that experience in a very positive way. he then told a story about this businessman that failed in business 9 times and was overwhelmed, and he used the term grief and just kept wondering why he kept failing. And he happened to be lying down and he saw this insect climbing up a blade of grass to get to some food on top of it. And 9 times it fell before it got to the food. And finally, the 10th time, it made it to the top. And that gave him inspiration to try a 10th time, and he was successful. This reminds me of a story. Is it an Irishman who I think he was, after loss in a battle, was in his barn and saw this spider doing something similar to that. Then he got all inspired and went out and fought and won. So there's stories like this in the West too. So anyway, this businessman realized, quote, if bugs can succeed at something, humans must be even more capable. He goes on from there and saying suicide is an extremely bad thing to do. It hurts yourself in the future lives, and it hurts others. And I can tell you this, the people that I have known that have had a family member commit suicide, it has been extremely rough on them. And a lot of times people blame themselves. Well, if I just would have said something or done something different, they wouldn't have done that. And you get survivor's guilt and so on and so forth. As long as we are alive, there's a chance for us to lead a wonderful life. Instead of being short-sighted, he advises that we should look to the future rather than dwell on something that is now in the past. Finally, the last section is titled Fulfilling the Wishes of the Departed. We try to do the best we can to fulfill the final wishes of the departed, but on the other hand, we need to cherish our life and the lives of others, maintain a kind heart, and live on happily. That's our duty, is to live happily. We have to be careful with the possessions, on the other hand, that the departed leave behind, because at first are still around and think they're alive. And if they see people fighting over their possessions or throwing their possessions away, thinking this is garbage, I don't want it, it can make them upset. So we need to let the deceased, you might say, depart in peace. Don't be too concerned about how much you inherit, property you inherit, and so forth. And it's actually best before you die to give away as much of your property as possible. So it's no longer your property, and then you don't have a problem being attached to it in the bardo. And of course, you can give it to relatives in advance. And you can also donate money to monasteries, nunneries, stupas, construction of statues, prayer wheels, and all kinds of things, and then dedicate the merit to the deceased. So there's lots of things that we can do to help. The end quote is, it will definitely be beneficial to the deceased if we can dedicate at least a portion of the inheritance towards charity. The question is, what if you develop Alzheimer's? How can you practice then? And one thing that he keeps saying that I really haven't stressed much is saying even one mani, 1 6-syllable mantra, Om Mani Padme Hung, is beneficial. And so if you can remember enough to do that. Now, at some point, you're not going to be able to remember that. My mother had dementia. But interestingly enough, up until about the last 2 months, she remembered my name. So what you want to do is develop the habit now, so it's easier to remember. Another thing that she remembered was her purse. Where's my purse? Where's my purse? She'd hide it, she'd put it somewhere, but she'd always remember she needed her purse. Again, a habit. And so we want to develop these strong, virtuous habits now. So that's an excellent question. And quite honestly, even for people that have a totally clear, I shouldn't say clear, their mind has not deteriorated at the point of death, you're still mostly on habitual patterns, so you want good habitual patterns. The question is telling a person to visualize Amitabha above their head, and I told my grandmother to visualize Jesus, or that Jesus was over her head. What about an atheist? And I don't think that there's much you can do for them. Now, I will say this, it's good to tap a person after they die on top of their head to bring their consciousness to the top of the head, and you could do that for an atheist. But outside of making a dumb joke about this atheist, I really don't have a good answer, and I'm not going to make a dumb joke. The question is that while these instructions are to visualize Amitabha in his pure realm, I don't do that practice very often, and I do have this main practice that I do regularly. Well, which one should I do? To realize one deity, you realize all of them, and I would recommend doing the one that you are most familiar with and comfortable with, unless you talk to a higher lama and they tell you differently. I will say this is not directly related to this question, but this is something that you want to avoid. A Buddhist told me this story. This person travels by air regularly and was on a extremely rough, turbulent flight. And she started doing Amitabha's mantra and visualized him. Had the clearest, sharpest visualization of Amitabha ever. And the reaction was, oh no, I'm not ready to go yet. So, no. I try to avoid that.